Lilith, the first woman, banished, erased, and rewritten by the victors of heaven. But who was she really? A demon, a goddess, or something much older? Something even the Anunnaki themselves feared. Before the world was divided by scripture, there was only the idea. The eternal woman who stood beside creation itself. In the West, they called her Lilith. In the East, she was never forgotten. Where one faith condemned her, another crowned her. And in those ancient hymns, we still hear her name, just spoken in different tongues.
You can trace every civilization's fear of the feminine back to her. And because of this fear, her memory was scrubbed from history.
Lilith wasn't erased because she was evil. She was erased because she remembered.
This is the Anunnaki Connection.
Before the story of Eve, another woman appears in the traditions of Genesis, a name found in the margins of sacred texts, suppressed for centuries but never fully erased. In the mystical texts of Jewish Kabbalah, and in much older folklore, we find an alternate creation story. Not a woman formed from a man's rib, but two people created at the same time, from the same material. Adam and Lilith, both sculpted, as the texts say, from the same clay. They were, in their origin, equal, and that equality became the source of their conflict. The legends describe a quarrel over dominance. Lilith refused to be subservient, famously arguing, "We are equal, for we both come from the earth." When Adam attempted to force her, she uttered the sacred name of God and fled Eden forever. She chose exile over submission. But this act of self-liberation was not recorded as a victory. It was reframed as a transgression. The first woman, by asserting her independence, became the first demon. She was exiled to the Red Sea, and her identity was twisted into that of a night spirit, a stealer of children, a mother of monsters. Some of the earliest Hebrew scholars wondered if Lilith's shadow had slipped quietly into Genesis. When you look closely, there are two creation stories. In the first, written around the 6th century BC, God creates man and woman together. Male and female, he created them. But in the second, likely composed later, man comes first, shaped from the dust, and woman follows, drawn from his rib. That contradiction lingered for centuries, whispered about in rabbinic circles and oral tradition. By the 9th century AD, it finally took form, a story of a woman who refused to submit, who left the garden rather than bow to man. Lilith, Adam's first wife, and his first rebellion. But her origins predate the biblical story. Her name echoes much older figures from Mesopotamia, the Lilitu or Lamashtu, feared night spirits associated with the wind, the wild, and dangers to mothers and infants. It's a chillingly effective act of character assassination. Take an independent woman, merge her with an ancient demon, and create a cautionary tale. The function of this rewrite seems clear. By casting Lilith as a demonic runaway, later scribes could introduce a more suitable model. Eve, compliant, secondary, created from man and for him. The story of Lilith was buried, replaced by a narrative that locked in a new social and religious hierarchy. But the suppressed story of the first woman never truly disappeared. It survived, an uncomfortable question hiding just beneath the surface of the official text. And in her exile, Lilith became a powerful and dangerous symbol of everything that world sought to control. After Lilith fled Eden, she wandered through the Red Sea region, a place said to be filled with demons and spirits exiled from heaven. According to the alphabet of Ben Sira, this was where she made her home after refusing to return to Adam. When the three angels, Sanvi, Sansavi, and Samangalaf, found her, They demanded that she come back or face punishment. Lilith refused. She told them she was created equal to Adam, from the same earth, and would not return to submission. The angels warned her that if she refused, 100 of her children would die each day. She accepted the curse, and so she remained in exile, grieving her lost children, but never returning to the garden. It's here that the Zohar and later Kabbalistic writings pick up her story. In her isolation, Lilith's anger and loneliness began to manifest as creative power. Her cries reached the ears of another outcast being, Samael, the angel of death, the one the rabbis called the venom of God. Samael heard her from the outer spheres, beyond the seventh heaven. He was drawn to her fury, recognizing in her the same energy he carried, a divine essence twisted by rebellion. Some texts describe their meeting as taking place in the void between the worlds. Others say he descended to the Red Sea itself, cloaked in black fire. When they met, their union was immediate and catastrophic. The treatise on the left emanation says that the two were like flame joining flame, their power merging into something creation itself could barely contain. Samael was called the blind serpent, and Lilith was the torturous serpent. Together, they formed the dual serpent, the mirrored counterpart to the tree of life. In one version, the cosmic being known as the blind dragon, believed to be Leviathan, officiated their union. When combined, they formed what the Kabbalists called the Qliphoth, the shells or shadow side of divine creation. From this union came their offspring, the Lilim, spirits of the night. Some were said to be succubi, others incubi, feeding on the energy of the living. Each night, Lilith conceived hundreds of these children, and each dawn, 100 were destroyed by divine command. Yet new ones were always born. The war between creation and destruction never ceased. Fearing their growing numbers, God is said to have intervened directly. Some texts claim he sent Metatron to strike Samael and render him impotent, cutting off the flow of demonic creation. Others claim Samael was castrated by decree, the heavenly equivalent of removing his creative force. Even so, the bond between Lilith and Samael could not be undone. In the Zohar, they remain united as king and queen of the infernal realm, the shadow reflection of Adam and Eve. Where Adam and Eve represent divine harmony, Samael and Lilith represent divine imbalance, the necessary chaos that mirrors order. In later mystical writings, Samael and Lilith were said to join only through mirrors or dream states. Their embrace could not exist in the material world without tearing the veil between heaven and hell. When they do meet, the world trembles. An event described as the copulation of the serpent and the night. And while scripture remembers them as monsters, Kabbalah whispers a different truth, that their union is part of the divine balance itself, because without shadow, there is no light.
They said her voice rode the wind. The Sumerians called it Lilitu, the spirit of the storm, a whisper in the desert that carried warnings and seductions alike. In tablets older than Genesis, this wind was not evil. It was alive, the breath of the gods, the current that carried their messengers between worlds. But over centuries, the night wind became something to fear. Priests wrote charms to drive it away. Mothers etched her name on amulets beside their newborns. The divine breath had become a curse. Maybe the ancients weren't afraid of Lilith herself. Maybe they were afraid of what she carried: knowledge, freedom, and the reminder that the gods themselves once bled. In the British Museum sits a broken tablet of fired clay. Archaeologists call it the Burney relief. To most, it's just an artifact. but to the initiated it's a confession carved in stone. The figure stands naked, crowned, winged, and unashamed. Her taloned feet rest upon lions, the symbols of kingship. The owls at her side guard the threshold between life and death. The inscription does not say Lilith. It doesn't need to. The image alone speaks her name. To the Sumerians, the gods walked among men. To the Hebrews, she became a warning. One civilization's goddess is another's demon.
To find the true origin of Lilith, we must dig deeper than the Hebrew texts, back into the dust of Mesopotamia. Here, she is not a single figure, but often part of a triad of spirits. Sumerian and Akkadian cuneiform tablets warn of the Lilitu, the Ardat Lily, and the Lamashtu, spirits of the wind and the night, often seen as a danger to childbirth and sleeping men. While later cultures would define them purely as demonic, their original role may have been more complex. Some scholars suggest these lily spirits were not demons at all, but outcast priestesses of Inanna, the Sumerian goddess of love, war, and political power. Inanna, later known as Ishtar, was a notoriously complex and independent deity. Her sacred priestesses often operated outside the bounds of conventional marriage. It's a compelling theory. Were the Lilitu simply women who, like the later Lilith, refused to be domesticated? The most powerful and controversial image we have is the Burney relief. It depicts a beautiful winged goddess, naked, with taloned feet. She stands confidently on the backs of two lions and is flanked by large, silent owls. Academics debate whether this is Inanna, her sister Ereshkigal, or Lilith herself. But the symbolism is a key. Wings for freedom, lions for power, and talons that connect her to the birds of the night. The owls are a crucial clue. They are hunters that move silently in the dark, creatures that see what is hidden from the sunlit, rational world. This connects the figure of Lilith to a different kind of knowledge, an intuitive, nocturnal wisdom. It's no accident that a figure representing total independence would be associated with those who see in the darkness. This leads to another, more modern and speculative interpretation. What if the stories of her origin, created equal to Adam, but fundamentally different, are a kind of fragmented memory? In the Sumerian texts, the gods who walk the earth are the Anunnaki. Could Lilith have been, as some theorists propose, a different kind of creation entirely? A being caught between the divine genetics of the gods and the new race of humanity? This would reframe her rebellion, making it not just an act of will, but an expression of her fundamental hybrid nature, belonging fully to neither world. This narrative of rebellion finds a powerful echo in the Gnostic traditions. The Gnostics saw the material world as a prison and the God who created it as an ignorant jailer. Their myths speak of Sophia, the divine feminine wisdom whose essence fell into matter, becoming the divine spark trapped within humanity. Lilith in this light is not a demon, but an agent of that original wisdom. She is the feminine aspect of a rebellion against the illusion, an enlightener seeking to free humanity not from sin, but from ignorance. This theme of a benevolent rebel god is not unique to Gnosticism. It has a much older precedent, one that takes us back to the Anunnaki themselves. In the Sumerian epics, we see a constant tension between two half-brothers, Enlil, the commander, who demands strict obedience from humanity, and Enki, the scientist, the creator, who defies Enlil to enlighten and save his creation. It was Enki who defied the council of gods to warn his human son of the great flood, saving mankind from total annihilation. Lilith's rebellion is a mirror of this divine insurgency. Her refusal to submit to Adam isn't just a domestic dispute. It's an echo of that fundamental Anunnaki civil war. It is a conflict between a faction demanding absolute control and another faction the faction of Enki, and perhaps of Lilith, that championed knowledge and free will. She is a threat because she offers humanity the same choice Enki did: to remain an obedient servant or to awaken to its own divine potential.
Every being that descended from the heavens carried a name of power. The old Magi believed that to speak that name was to call them forth, and so the scribes erased it. Lilith became Lilu, then Lilitu, then silence. The priests feared the resonance, the sound itself, might open a door, but the name survived in fragments, in the grimoires of exiles and dreamers. In Kabbalah, the Black Moon Lilith is not a celestial body, but a mathematical absence, a void where gravity bends light. Even the heavens could not erase her entirely. The void itself remembers.
The Black Moon Lilith isn't a planet or a physical object. It's a mathematical point in the moon's orbit, the farthest point from Earth, called the lunar apogee. So if you imagine the moon's path around us as an oval, Black Moon Lilith is the spot where that oval stretches farthest away. That point moves through the zodiac every 9 months or so, completing a full cycle about every 8.8 years. Because it's not a body but a position, it represents an energy, an invisible gravitational tension. And that's the key to its symbolism. It's where the moon's influence becomes most distant, most detached, most shadowed. In astrology, the moon represents instinct, emotion, motherhood, and safety, our inner world. So its farthest point symbolizes the rejected side of that inner world, the part that refuses submission, that seeks autonomy, that carries anger, sexuality, and truth that's been suppressed. That's why astrologers link it to the mythic Lilith. Wherever Black Moon sits in one's natal chart is said to mark the place you reclaim personal power after being silenced. It's the wound and the weapon, both the voice you weren't allowed to use, but eventually do. In modern occult systems, it is considered the shadow of the moon. The unlit counterpart to the divine feminine Kabbalists would call it the caliphothic mirror of Yesod, the lunar Sephira. It's where intuition turns into raw instinct, where creation meets destruction. Some mystics even describe it as the gateway between the human soul and its cosmic source. As the West began its long campaign to demonize Lilith, a parallel story was unfolding in the East. But it was an inversion. In Hindu cosmology, the feminine is not secondary, it is foundational. It is called Shakti, the primal creative power that moves creation itself. Shakti is not a goddess. It is the current of energy that flows through all gods, all humans, all existence. It is fierce, creative, and untamable. This energy finds its most powerful expression in the figure of Kali, the Dark Mother, the devourer of ego and illusion. Her wild, unkempt hair, her dance on the lifeless body of Shiva, her association with the cremation ground. All of it echoes Lilith's total rejection of patriarchal control. Both figures embody a terrifying and essential truth, that chaos and creation are inseparable. The West looked at this energy, called it Lilith, and cursed it. The East looked, called it Kali, and crowned it as divine. But this Eastern archetype isn't only about darkness. We see it in Durga, the warrior goddess standing unyielding, her battle against the buffalo demon a perfect symbol of divine will conquering tyranny. We also see it in Lilita, the goddess of desire and radiant, sensual beauty. Lilita embodies the power of self-possession and sacred pleasure, the very aspects of her nature that Lilith was denied in Eden. The parallels extend to the central symbol of the fall, the serpent. In Hindu Tantra, Kundalini is the serpent of dormant, divine power, coiled at the base of the spine. When it awakens and rises, it brings total enlightenment. This forces a re-evaluation of the Eden story. Was the serpent in the garden a tempter, a source of corruption? Or was it too a symbol of the Kundalini energy, the spark of awakening that the god of Eden sought to suppress? In both stories, a serpent offers a choice, and that choice is knowledge. Across all these myths, separated by continents and cultures, runs the same undeniable thread, the archetype of the divine feminine that cannot and will not be contained. She is the unbroken current of rebellion, transformation, and sovereign wisdom. Each culture tells her story differently, but the essence never changes. It is the story of the woman who would not bow. The Sumerian epics describe the Anunnaki creating humanity in their image through a process of genetic fusion. They needed a worker race, a primitive laborer. This narrative of biological engineering, of trial and error, forces a critical question. If Adam was the successful, compliant model, the Adamu, then who or what was Lilith? This hybrid theory posits Lilith as something else entirely. Perhaps one of the first experiments, a prototype. A being that was, in a sense, too successful, retaining too much of the divine Anunnaki genetics, too much awareness, too much power. Or perhaps she was a forbidden experiment from the start, an unauthorized hybrid, an echo of Enki's rogue science. In either case, the result was the same, a being that was ungovernable. This idea of ancient genetic manipulation casts her conflicting myths in a startling new light. Why is she depicted as both human and divine? Both a creator of life and a destroyer of it? Are these mythological contradictions simply metaphors, or are they a fragmented cultural memory of a being who was a literal biological hybrid? Her wings, her taloned feet. Are these just symbols? Or are they genetic markers of an alternate or failed version of the human form? After millennia of being branded a demon, a heretic, and a sin, something is changing. Lilith is rising again. Her name is no longer just a footnote in obscure texts. We see her in modern astrology, where Black Moon Lilith represents the primal, untamed self. We see her in new occult philosophies and spiritual practices, and we see her more than ever in our art, our music, and our stories, a powerful icon of the outcast who claims her own power. This resurgence is not a coincidence. It signifies a profound shift, a collective awakening. It is the return of the repressed divine feminine, forcing its way back into a world that has been dangerously out of balance for centuries. It's about reclaiming the part of ourselves she represents, the intuitive, the autonomous, and the sovereign. If the hybrid theory holds, this awakening is even more profound. It is the stirring of the lost hybrid consciousness, the part of our own genetic and spiritual heritage that was locked away in the beginning. It is the return of the original code. This ancient duality, the struggle between the manufactured and the divinely wild, is a story that repeats itself even today. A symbolic rebirth of the ancient goddess, reminding us that her nature is, and always has been, inside us.